Someone is having a medical emergency on a busy city sidewalk. They've gone down hard on the pavement. Dozens of people are walking past. Some slow for a second, glance over, and keep moving. Others don't break stride at all. Nobody calls for help. Nobody stops. And the longer nobody stops, the less likely it becomes that anyone will. This is not a story about cruelty. It's not about indifference in any ordinary sense. What's happening on that sidewalk is a documented psychological phenomenon with a name, a mechanism, and a body count. It has been replicated in laboratories and confirmed in disaster after disaster for more than half a century. And the more people who witness it happening, the worse the outcome gets. On the night of March 13th, 1964, a 28-year-old woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment complex in Kew Gardens, Queens. Her attacker stabbed her twice, then fled when she screamed. She stumbled toward her building. He came back. He found her in a stairwell and attacked her again. The assault lasted 35 minutes in total. The New York Times reported 2 weeks later that 38 of her neighbors had witnessed parts of the attack from their windows and that not one of them called the police until it was over. The precise number was challenged in the decades that followed, but the essential claim that a crowd of witnesses produced no intervention was real enough that two psychologists at Columbia University decided to build an entire research program around it. John Darley and Bibb Latané weren't interested in judging the neighbors of Kitty Genovese. They were interested in the mechanism. Something about the presence of a crowd had neutralized normal human responses to another person's suffering, and they wanted to understand exactly how. What they designed over the following months became some of the most replicated experiments in the history of social psychology. They weren't just studying Queens in 1964. They were studying something embedded in the basic structure of how human beings process responsibility when other witnesses are present. The implications, once published, spread far beyond academic journals. They changed how emergency response training works. They changed how researchers understand mass behavior. And they confirmed something most people would prefer not to believe about themselves. The first experiment was elegant in its simplicity. A single participant sat alone in a room filling out a questionnaire when smoke began filtering in through a vent in the wall. Not a thin wisp, thick, acrid smoke, the kind that registers immediately as serious. When participants were alone, 75% got up, investigated, and reported it within 2 minutes. Then Darley and Latané added people. When two other participants were seated in the same room, the reporting rate dropped to 38%. When those two additional people were Confederates trained to notice the smoke, shrug, and return to their questionnaires, only 10% of real participants reported anything at all. The smoke was chemically identical in every condition. The potential danger was the same. The only variable was how many people were atching it and doing nothing. Darley and Latané named the mechanism Diffusion of Responsibility. When a single person witnesses an emergency, the full moral weight of acting sits on them entirely. They feel it as something close to obligation. When 10 people witness the same emergency, each person's perceived share of that responsibility drops to something closer to a tenth. Nobody feels the full weight anymore, so nobody moves with the urgency that full weight would produce. And here's what makes it genuinely dangerous. The larger the crowd, the stronger each individual's assumption becomes that someone more qualified, someone who saw the beginning of this, someone with a phone already in hand, has already done something. The crowd generates a feeling of coverage. The coverage is false, but it feels completely real to every person standing inside it. Layered underneath diffusion of responsibility is a second mechanism Darley and Latané documented with equal precision: pluralistic ignorance. In the first seconds of most emergencies, the situation is ambiguous. A man on the ground could be having a cardiac event. He could be intoxicated. When humans can't immediately read a situation, they do something completely automatic. They scan the faces of the people around them for cues about how to interpret what they're seeing. If the people nearby look calm, the brain processes that calmness as evidence that nothing is actually wrong. The problem is that everyone in the crowd is running the same calculation simultaneously. Every person is reading the apparent calm of every other person as a signal. The crowd produces a consensus that nobody inside it actually holds, and the person on the ground keeps waiting. The Seizure Experiment removed every possible ambiguity. Participants sat in individual booths and were connected to what they believed was a group conversation with other students. During the conversation, one voice, a Confederate, began describing symptoms: stammering, difficulty breathing, a statement that he was going to die if nobody helped him. When participants believed they were the only other person on the line, 85% left the booth to find help within 60 seconds. When they believed 4 other people were also listening, only 31% responded. Some didn't respond at all, sitting motionless inside the booth while a voice described dying. The suffering was identical in every condition. What changed was a number. The arithmetic of responsibility did more to determine whether a person acted than any individual moral calculation they were making about themselves. And here's the part that researchers didn't expect going in. The crowd doesn't just slow the response. In documented cases, it eliminates it entirely. Darley and Latané recorded scenarios where a lone witness moved to help in under 30 seconds, and the same scenario witnessed by a dozen people produced no response for 4 full minutes. 4 minutes is an eternity in a cardiac arrest. It's the difference between full recovery and severe neurological damage. It's the difference between survival and death. The research forced a conclusion that felt almost impossible to hold steady. A crowd of bystanders around a person in genuine danger is not simply neutral. Under the right conditions, an ambiguous setting, strangers with no prior relationship, a crowd is measurably worse than one person. The witness who believes they're alone is more likely to help than the witness who knows 50 others are watching. There is a way to break it. Researchers have documented it consistently enough that knowing it changes what actually happens in real emergencies. Bystander paralysis collapses when one person takes a specific, directed action aimed at a single identifiable individual, not a general call into the air, a pointed instruction. You, in the blue coat, call an ambulance now. That single act destroys diffusion of responsibility because it makes the distribution of obligation impossible. The person named cannot tell themselves that someone else has it covered. Pluralistic ignorance breaks at the same moment because the crowd now has a visible signal to read, rather than blank faces to misinterpret. Studies from the early 1980s found that explicit role assignment of this kind raised intervention rate as from below 30% to above 80% in controlled conditions. The crowd isn't inherently the problem, but someone has to step outside its logic first. The effect doesn't stop at physical emergencies. Researchers documented the same diffusion patterns in workplaces, in online communities, in classrooms where a student is visibly struggling and every other student assumes the teacher has already noticed. The larger the group with shared awareness of a problem, the lower the probability that any individual within it treats the problem as theirs to solve. Darley spent the following decades expanding the framework. He found that even mild forms of connection between bystanders, shared membership in a group, a common affiliation, any prior interaction at all, significantly reduced the diffusion effect. Strangers diffuse responsibility most efficiently. People with some reason to see each other as connected are substantially more likely to ACT, which suggests the mechanism isn't an irreparable flaw in human nature. It's a function of distance, social distance, the kind that makes it easy to assume, standing just a few feet away, that the problem belongs to someone else.